Hello and welcome to the Temple Mount podcast. My name is Shogun. This is our first podcast returning after about a month or two hiatus. Very excited to be back at it. We have a whole selection of topics I want to touch on today, including xenotransplantation, artificial intelligence agencies, quantum technology, and a lot more. So it'll be sort of a classic roundtable Temple Mount conspiracy theory episode, as well as an Ask Me Anything Q&A about what's been going on in the last couple months. And I'm going to try and tie the topics that we're talking about into some of my own personal experiences and speculation. It's not easy to tell the narrative as a narrative, and some of it I'm dicey about whether or not I should even be talking about. So I'm going to try and talk about it kind of elliptically by talking about some of these topics. But thanks for joining. I guess one of the first things I think is really fascinating is a technology called xenotransplantation. I'm supposed to mention join the Temple Mount Discord server and subscribe to the Temple Mount official podcast on YouTube. Also, please look at the voice text channel because I compiled a bunch of sources here, because a lot of what I'm going to talk about is going to sound really bizarre. But if you actually look at the backing up sources and you give it the basic thought experiment that classified technology is, 10 to 30 years ahead of what's publicly available, it's really not as strange as it sounds. And it's really quite interesting. So anyway, xenotransplantation is the transplantation of an extraterrestrial or simply non-human body part or tissue into a human being, such as, for example, a pig heart. So they've successfully given multiple people pig hearts as heart transplants to save their lives, so they have a functioning organ from another species. And this has been done quite a bit, and a related technology is called chimeras. And with chimeras, they inject cells from one species into another, so they've created human lamb hybrids, human monkey hybrids. They've transplanted human brain matter into monkeys and made more intelligent monkeys. So they've created over 5 different human animal hybrids and hundreds of human monkey hybrid embryos. And you can see that all there. So they very much are using trans-species technology now. And this also ties into the concept of super soldiers, which again, it sounds like something from a Marvel comic movie or something like that, but super soldier programs are 100% real. Russia has them, China has them, America has them, and they've had them since the Cold War, and they've had them since World War II, and the idea is to make humans who exceed normal human performance parameters because of some kind of change that you've put in them, whether that be technological, behavioral, training, drugs, or all of the above. And right now, Russia is accusing Ukraine of having super soldiers, while at the same time claiming to have their own super soldiers. And if you go back even further, the Russians claim they trained psychic super soldiers who could crash computers with their minds. There is such a thing as military dolphins. And again, you have to look at all these sources to know that I'm not just making all this up. This is all true. They have military dolphins that are part of militaries, and the Russians claim that their dolphins have helped teach them to create psychic spies who can do things like interface with technology through their mind. And there are military dolphins even deployed in the Black Seas around the Ukraine right now. So why does this all tie together? There's even more weird shit I want to bring up. There's psychic animals, and in particular, there's psychic octopuses. So if you look at the sources, they use octopuses to predict the outcomes of sports events. And this one octopus they killed and ate recently, really evil, had predicted with an 85% success rate the outcome of all the World Cup football games. And so then I want to tie into octopus intelligence. So there's a literal theory in biology, like a real theory, not a joke theory, that octopuses are aliens from outer space because they don't have any evolutionary neighbors or cousins, and they seem to stand completely outside of the human evolutionary web. And they have human levels of intelligence. Like, it's arguable which of us is actually smarter. And what octopus and humans both have is something called transponsons. And transponsons are called jumping genes. So what that means is, in response to environmental challenges, the octopus can take segments of its brain DNA or RNA and put it somewhere else where it's more useful. In other words, they can actively evolve their own intelligence in response to problems. And humans have that ability to an only very limited degree, but octopuses have it to a very high degree. And then there is technology like CRISPR, which allows them to selectively remove or implant RNA or DNA sequences from an animal or from a human, and chimeras that prove that you can hybridize them. So what am I actually talking about here is literally just the theoretical plausibility and, in my opinion, likelihood that some attempt to do xenotransplantation from octopus to people either has already happened or is in the process of being developed, because, as it's shown, they have almost paranormal levels of ability, and they have a very similar kind of intelligence and a very similar kind of genetic material in their brains to humans. So creating a super intelligent human through selective implantation of DNA jumping sequences called transponsons from octopus to human brains could, in theory, create super soldiers or people with supernatural levels of intelligence if they didn't die from xeno rejection, which is where the body rejects the alien tissue. Now, that is literally a pretty crazy mad scientist sounding plan, but I just think if you actually look at the overall scenario, it's actually more likely than you think. And there's a King of the Hill episode called Operation Infinite Walrus, in which the U.S. government tries to turn Hank's friend Bill, the fat bald guy, into a walrus as part of a non-consensual military program. Now, that sounds completely ridiculous, but that's actually based on a true story. They literally took a bunch of unsuspecting people and tried to turn them into half human, half walrus hybrids so that they would have more resistance to cold water. So this kind of experimentation will happen along with technological implants, which they're definitely doing. They'll also be doing biological implants. And whether they use octopi for that or something else, octopi would be the obvious choice, as well as cetaceans or cephalopods like dolphins or whales, if your goal was to increase intelligence. And I guess what I would argue is, in the increasingly information-rich and complex modern warfare and spycraft environment, creating a superhumanly intelligent agent or operative for anything from coding to spy work to being a soldier is a really important goal. And xenotransplantation is too promising of an avenue for states not to be pursuing it. And the number of animals that exist that could plausibly be used to enhance human intelligence is quite small, and none of them are more suitable than octopi for that. So this part of the conversation pertains to xenotransplantation and the theory that octopi could be from other planets. And again, just a weird personal story. I'm a big fan of the Winnipeg Police Service. I think they're doing a great job. But one time they picked me up and they said to me, I said, "Who do you guys work for?" They said, "We work for the one-eyed grand architect of the universe." And I said, "Where are you taking me?" And I said, "We're taking you to put an octopus inside your body." Now, at the time, I thought I didn't know what to think. And the most logical explanation is they were just trying to mess around with me as a joke. But when I looked into this, it's actually quite a bit more plausible that this has happened than you would probably think. And again, there's all the sources for this are in the voice text channel. So I'll just quickly read a few of them. DNA jumps between animal species. CRISPR gene editing allows you to remove or implant the genomes from living organisms, human or otherwise. Remarkable intelligence. Octopus and human brains share the same jumping genes. And again, the reason this is important is the jumping genes, which are called transponsons, which are a particular kind of intelligence neurons that have a very important difference, which is that they can replace themselves in the genetic sequence in order to solve an evolutionary problem. So in other words, they're capable of learning and thinking in a way that humans are not. And it's also worth pointing out that The octopus has literally 9 brains. It has one central brain and one brain in each of its independent tentacles. So it's 8 independent brains connected to one central brain, which is amazing. And if you sever one of the tentacles, it will bring food back to the central body of the octopus. Even though it's been separated from that body, it will still continue to serve the interests of that body. Which means if you cut off all 8 octopuses from an octopus brain, you would have 9 different beings, all serving one central consciousness, which all came from the same being in the first place. So it's kind of amazing. And there's literally no inherent technological reason why you couldn't use CRISPR, as far as I know, and I'm obviously not a scientist in this area, why you couldn't take octopus transponsons and put them into a human brain through a surgical procedure. And again, why would you do this? Because it would literally potentially create supernaturally intelligent human agents, which is something that they have an interest in, for sure. And there's reasons why I, in particular, are interested in this. NSA would say this is all like riffing off of his experience, because his story, as you guys remember, is that aliens brought like a mechanical squid into his room, and he called it like a sub-quantum unit interface device, but said it was like a mechanical squid that buried into his brain. And he thinks that this whole thing that I experienced with the police was just them making like a joking reference to his experience. But to me, it's much more complicated than that. And then the second thing I want to talk about, which pertains to like my little adventure in the real world over the last couple months, is this whole thing about Aurora. Because strangely enough, this whole Aurora thing ties directly into the octopus thing. So what do I mean when I say the Aurora thing? So this is very bizarre, right? But it starts with me walking outside and seeing a wall made of random rubbish and detritus accumulated by a homeless person. And that homeless person, like many other homeless people in my city, which is Winnipeg, seemed to be like compelled to make little structures by kind of semi-organizing garbage. And so he had done this, and I noticed that one of the bricks in the wall that he had made was a Bible, and it was a very beautiful Bible that I still have, and it's an Eastern Standard Version, ESV, but it had a cover page that I don't have anymore. And when I read that cover page, it had this weird dedication on it, and it was something like, "To the sacrifice that we make for the church, that the world will never know, for the reasons that we deeply serve his mysterious purpose, and may we forever remember our sacrifice to God for what we do," or something like that. And then it showed a seal. Now, again, I'm a certifiably crazy person, so there is that. But nevertheless, when I saw that image, it triggered lost memories of a past life. And I never believed in past lives before, but I had this like hyper realistic memory or vision of jumping out of planes as part of like a military operation, as well as the whole like preceding sequence to that. And that was also, I guess, when I unlocked this memory of this person named Aurora, because I wrote in the Bible, R.I.P. Aurora. That was when that first started, and that was years ago. Now, later, I did actually meet and for a time have a role in the custody of a person by the same name, but that person was not hit by a car. However, I had a dream that was incredibly vivid of this little girl named Aurora running in front of a car, being hit by the car as I was like running and screaming and trying to catch this kid and like shouting no as loud as I could. Kid gets hit by the car, and then I see them like go down into the underworld, but then I look up and see this really beautiful depiction of Jesus, and that was the dream. But when I woke up from it, I knew, I was like, that wasn't a dream. That was like a memory. I had a daughter in a past life who got hit by a car. Now, I know this sounds pretty crazy, but in my dream and in my memory that I recovered when I found that Bible, I wrote the name Aurora. This is years ago already, the whole Aurora thing. Then I recovered the memory. Then I actually meet and take care of a kid with that name who wasn't the same kid, but had the same name. Then one day I'm going by a cemetery, and I jump over the wall of the cemetery, and I beeline to one specific grave out of the hundreds of graves in the cemetery. I just go straight to one, not two, not three. I don't check any other ones. I go specifically right to one, like I'm guided there by a compass. And it is a little girl with angel wings, and the name is Aurora. And that was the name. And I started crying and then recovering even more memories of this little girl named Aurora that was my daughter, who died because she ran in front of a car and I was not paying enough attention, or I was not close enough to stop it. And this was like incredibly traumatic to me. I was like crying and sobbing and apologizing to this little girl. Now, another weird coincidence around that is Excalibur, who isn't here but is a member of the server, he made an image for the server, like a welcome image that just said the Temple Mount. You can see it in the voice text, or I can post it, and it's her grave. It's a little girl as a stone angel with wings, and he had made that one of the intro messages to this server before I ever found that grave. And again, I directly beelined in on that grave and went right to it. And it was Aurora's grave. And then I started having even more memories of this little girl and her dying and all this stuff. Then, even weirder, I go to they have these little like bird box book libraries. So they have these little bird box book libraries in Winnipeg where people put a little birdhouse full of books and you can pick any books that you want. So I go and I beeline straight to this book and I pick out one book, and it's called On the Benefits of Being an Octopus. And the story is about a little girl, and it shows that you can see all this in the voice text. The story is about a little girl who actually is an octopus, but because octopuses have such amazing camouflage and mimicry abilities, she's living among human beings and is a little girl, like a human little girl, but she's actually an octopus. But her name is Aurora. Her name is Aurora, and she's a little girl, exactly the same age as the girl that I had the memories about losing. And her name is Aurora, and she's a little octopus. And in the story, the whole sequence of the little kid running out in front of the street, getting hit by the car, it's all there in the book. The whole thing is described in detail to the point that I couldn't even read it because it was so like emotional. But the book is about the little girl, which is the same as the tomb, which is the same like kid I met in real life, which is the same as the dream I had, which was all triggered by remembering a past life. So I don't know what any of you make of that. I don't really know what to make of it either, other than it's one thing that makes me really believe in past lives, because the emotional intensity of that memory of losing that kid from running in front of traffic is stronger than any other emotion I've ever felt in my life. So I find it hard to believe that it's not based in something. And again, the reason I'm telling these particular stories is because they're like tangential to my insane adventures in real life, which I probably can't talk about directly right now. But yeah, that's just another part of it. And basically, all I wanted to really touch on today is xenotransplantation, which is the ability to take genetic material from animals and put it into human beings successfully. CRISPR, which you guys are already all familiar with, which is genetic engineering technology to take parts of DNA out and move them. The fact that there's a very serious thesis that octopi are extraterrestrials from another planet, but even if they're not, they have something called jumping genes or transponsons that are both similar to humans but also superior, and that they are therefore capable of learning and even what we would call paranormal feats like precognition that most humans are not capable of. And it's therefore quite plausible that you either could or in the future will transplant octopi transponsons into a human brain, which is obviously like literally mad science. But all you need to do is make sure that they don't reject it, and a certain amount of hosts are going to be able to integrate with it. And the results of that are unpredictable, but could easily result in human superintelligence. I was also going to talk about angels. The only thing I want to say about angels is that we've all heard about Archangel Raphael, Michael, Gabriel, and Uriel. But I had never heard of an angel named Seraphiel. But during this whole process, I started drawing paintings of and writing the name Seraphiel. And then I finally decided to look it up, and it turns out that, yes, Seraphiel is not only an angel, but basically the second most powerful angel in the whole cosmology.
being known as the Silent Angel and the Defender of Metatron. So that was just another very bizarre thing. And it's going to have to be a different podcast where I try and give you guys the whole like narrative of all the crazy shit that happened in real life. But this at least is helping me like get my thoughts together on a few things. One thing I definitely need to talk about is MK Ultra. So you guys all know MK Ultra was a mind control program carried out by the CIA. It was carried out not only in America, but also in Canada, including in Winnipeg, where I live. And if you look at the sources in voice text or you look at the news, there is a class action lawsuit being leveled against the Canadian and American government for torturing and non-consensually experimenting on both Canadians and Americans, and doing it in Canada and in psychiatric hospitals without any consent. So if someone tells you like, oh, I was the subject of a social experiment in a psychiatric institution in Canada, you shouldn't roll your eyes and be like, oh, come on, crazy person, that would never happen. That literally did happen. And there's a whole group of people who got fucked over by it. And most likely that technology has continued. And just theoretically, I'd like to connect that to the known phenomenon of sleeper agents, which are intelligence assets that can be programmed to behave as though they're completely normal parts of society, but then can be triggered by particular phrases or events to become intelligence assets that are sort of like remote controlled spies or soldiers. That was the goal of MK Ultra. At the time, they said they could break down a person's personality, but not rebuild a new one in its place. I would argue that they have now solved that technological problem, and they now are capable of breaking down someone's personality and replacing it with one that is different and that they design, which they can then kind of remote control by activating or deactivating it. And that unfortunately ties directly into a recent event in the news where a man became like a mass shooter because he said his family was being targeted by this kind of technology. Obviously, always obey your local laws. Any kind of violence is bad. But be realistic. The US government has also said that China is developing mind control weapons to destroy the ability of the enemy to resist. And these are technological techniques exactly like the ones that NSA describes. And in the past, like the Cold War with MK Ultra, we know that whenever they believe the enemy is developing a certain technology, they will always justify developing the same technology themselves so as not to have some kind of tactical disadvantage. So if China is using this kind of electronic torture on its civilians, then you can guarantee that the US government is doing the same. And yeah, this covered a number of different topics. I'm just going to turn it over now. Does anyone have any questions or comments on anything whatsoever?
I mean, there's just so much there, man. Like it's I mean, it's your first time back, so in a while, so we should have expected there to be this much, but we're just taking it all in, or at least I am.
Yeah. Well, and I should just say I appreciate seeing you guys all again. It's great to see the crowd of people that attend, and we're going to be doing these events daily. And if this event seems scattershot, like you said, I have a whole bunch on my mind, and this is basically like throat clearing for me to actually tell a really wild story from my personal life, but it's just too crazy to say without like a little bit of like foundation being established and helping me get the narrative straight in my mind. Another thing I wanted to point out, if you go to the voice text channel, it says if you only go up about 7 or 8 articles, I can't see how far up it is, but they're basically saying that right here. Aliens could send quantum messages to Earth, calculations suggest. And the second one says aliens could use quantum signals to communicate with Earth. Well, it's already been proven that the human brain is a quantum apparatus. Like it has quantum nanotubules in it, and it does operate at the quantum state. So the possibility that aliens could, quote unquote, telepathically communicate with you from space at any distance through this quantum mechanism is completely real. So the plausibility of, again, what someone like NSA talks about, thinking he's being communicated with by aliens, it is plausible through quantum interaction that kind of communication could be happening. And it is proven fact that the government experimentation in psychological operations is happening. It's also a fact that Canada has recently decided to weaponize its public affairs. And so it did like really weird psychological operations, like convincing this one town that it was being assaulted by like vicious rabid wolves, but it was completely made up for whatever reason. So we really do live in a somewhat artificial world where people are literally trying to lie to us and confuse us. There are actually such things as sleeper agents. There is actually such a thing as human-animal hybrids. They're called chimeras. And just you have to somewhat speculate and connect the dots for yourself. But when you remember that this technology is 30, 40, 50 years more advanced in what they've actually done in top secret facilities than what they're telling you about in the Globe and Mail, I would suspect they have had some success creating superhuman super soldiers, if you want to call them that. Probably most of those super soldiers will work at computers rather than holding guns. And that ties into a deeper, bigger topic that I want to get into over the next couple of days about quantum supremacy and quantum cryptography and what I call World War Quantum. Because to my understanding, the next World War will not meaningfully be fought with robots, with guns, or with nuclear weapons, but will be a matter of who can achieve quantum supremacy and quite possibly who can achieve artificial intelligence supremacy. And I want to connect that to Enoch.
Shogi, you cut out there.
He disconnected.
I assume that's it's like a failure. He'll probably be back on in just a minute. Discord sometimes crashes.
Yeah, but so everybody else can hear, right? It was his connection.
If he's not back on in a couple minutes, we'll do a part 2 later on. Just have to splice them together.
Hi, sorry guys, my phone died. But does anybody have any questions or comments? I can't remember exactly what I was saying when I cut out, but on the subject quickly of quantum supremacy, essentially my understanding is a sufficiently powerful quantum computer could tackle any encryption system in the world, like any security system. And so obviously if you had such a master key, that would essentially give you world domination because you could control other people's financial accounts, their identities, their nuclear codes, everything. So this is, in my opinion, what will be fought next: World War Quantum or World War Cryptography, WWC or WWQ. And it's for that reason that such radical attempts to enhance intelligence, such as transplantation, technological implantation, stem cell injection, nootropic drugs, whatever the case is, will be seen as a necessity, because obviously more intelligent people are better at coding, programming, etc., the skills necessary to win this coming world war. And there is a supernatural aspect to it that I want to get into in the future when I talk about Dr. John Dee and Enochian magic. But I suppose that will suffice as a foundation setting or whatever, tip of the iceberg type discussion. Unless anybody had anything they wanted to add. All right. Well, we'll keep it short and sweet for this first episode, but thank you all very much for attending. Make sure you've joined the Temple Mount Discord server where we'll be recording this podcast every day, usually at 8 p.m. Just check the announcements channel and make sure you've joined the YouTube channel, which is called Temple Mount Official. Tons of great episodes there. Thank you, everybody, for joining, and make sure you check out Drewish's awesome new musical album called On the Temple Mount, which launched, and you can find the links in general chat. And have a great night, everybody. God bless. Do not take the mark of the beast. And if you're going to stick around, let's just jump to Templar Tavern for the rest of the night.